all eyes turned towards Marie as whispers began to spread through the crowd. The words floated through the air, cutting through the hum of the celebration. Low education, those words echoed in her mind like a slap across her face, reverberating in the glistening lights of the venue. Marie forced a smile, feeling awkward and out of place, trying her best to maintain some semblance of dignity for her daughter. But little did she know, only moments later, her daughter would silence the entire room with a shocking act, leaving everyone stunned. The whispers began to swirl as Marie stood at the edge of the banquet hall, her hands clenched tightly around each other, the pale purple dress she had ironed that very morning clinging to her form. It wasn't new, just the nicest one she owned, the dress she had worn on the day Ella, her daughter, graduated. She had thought it would be fitting for a day like this, an important one. But for the Groom's family, it was clear she didn't quite fit. As soon as she entered the hall, the whispers started. A woman at one of the tables laughed quietly, shaking her head. "Is that the bride's mother? She looks so shabby, probably didn't have much of an education," the woman murmured, not bothering to lower her voice. Marie heard it clearly. The words sliced through her, and though she forced a smile to keep her dignity intact, the sting of those words hit her harder than she could bear. She stood still, her gaze drawn to her daughter, Ella, standing proudly under the spotlight. Ella was radiant, her hair styled in a high bun, the fitted wedding dress hugging her slender figure, making her look like a princess from a fairy tale. Marie's mind drifted back to the nights spent together. Ella hunched over her textbooks while Marie read English passages aloud, struggling with the pronunciation. Marie remembered the long days spent wrapping loaves of bread and selling them just to make enough money to buy Ella the proper shoes for school. She hadn't had a degree, she hadn't had fame, but she had a daughter who was sharp, beautiful, and determined. When the whispers referred to her as low-educated, it didn't sting because of any shame she felt for herself. No, it hurt because she feared that her daughter would be looked down upon, judged for coming from someone like her. She turned, forcing herself to walk away from the crowd, stepping out onto the balcony to regain some semblance of composure. And then, she saw Ella. She hadn't even noticed when her daughter had come to join her, but there she was standing with her arms crossed, her expression soft but full of determination. Ella had heard everything. "I'm sorry, Mom," Ella's voice trembled as she spoke. "I know what they think, but you don't have to bear this. You shouldn't have to bear this." Marie shook her head, trying to push back the tears. "I'm fine, Ella. This is your special day." But Ella didn't look at her as if she were the bride who should be thinking only of her big moment. No, Ella stared at her mother with a look of quiet defiance, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears. "No," Ella said firmly, her voice resolute. "This is the day I'm going to do something right." Marie didn't understand what her daughter meant, but she could see the look in Ella's eyes. It wasn't the look of a bride about to enter marriage, it was the look of a daughter who understood the deep value of the mother who had raised her, and she wasn't about to let anyone, not even the groom's family, disrespect that bond. The music in the banquet hall swelled once again, signaling the start of the next segment of the evening. People slowly began to return to their seats, the buzz of whispered conversations gradually fading as the MC took the stage. It was time for the bride and groom to give their thank you speeches to both families. Marie, still struggling to keep her composure, returned to her seat. She forced a small, tight smile, despite the ache in her chest. Ella, standing across the room, glanced at her mother, her eyes locking onto Marie's for a brief moment. Then, with a subtle motion, Ella leaned in and whispered something to the groom, who looked momentarily startled before nodding in understanding. It was clear that something unusual was about to happen. And then, without further warning, Ella walked confidently toward the podium. "Before we thank both our families," Ella began, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone, "I would like to say a few words from my heart. These words are not part of the script, and perhaps no one could have anticipated them." The guests in the hall shifted in their seats, their murmurs growing louder. Marie furrowed her brow, unsure of what was happening. She could feel the tension building in the air, the weight of Ella's words pressing down on her. Ella paused for a moment, her soft smile lingering on her lips. Then, turning slightly, she faced her mother. Her gaze was warm, but there was a fierce determination in her eyes. "The woman sitting at the third table, wearing the simple purple dress, is my mother," Ella continued, her voice steady, though there was an undeniable emotion behind the words. "She doesn't have a university degree. She doesn't speak English like a native. She's never been taught about high society etiquette or grand weddings. But she is the one who has done everything a mother can and more." There was a slight tremor in Ella's voice, a fleeting crack that made Marie's heart ache, but Ella pressed on, not allowing herself to falter. For 12 years, she woke up at 4 a.m. every morning, worked at a bakery, and returned home with calloused hands, just so she could put me through university on a full scholarship, Ella continued. She never bought anything new for herself, but she always made sure there was enough for Mina for a hot meal, and a new book every semester. If that isn't education, then I don't know what definition of it could possibly be more worthy. A deep silence fell over the hall. The kind of silence that reached into the very core of everyone present. The weight of Ella's words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and Marie could feel her breath catch in her throat. "And if anyone," Ella continued, her gaze hardening, "no matter who, thinks that my mother is unworthy of being here because she doesn't have a degree, then I invite them to leave this hall before my husband and I continue this ceremony." A collective gasp of surprise echoed through the crowd, and Marie felt a mixture of pride and disbelief swelling within her. She could hear the murmur of shocked voices, the rustling of people shifting in their seats. Someone cleared their throat. Some faces turned a deep shade of red, and others, no one except the groom's parents, were now looking down at their hands, avoiding eye contact. Ella's stance didn't waver. She bowed her head slightly, gently placing the microphone down as she stepped back. There was nothing more for her to say. The unthinkable had been done. Ella had stood before hundreds of people on the most important day of her life to defend the woman who had given her everything. Marie couldn't hold back the tears any longer. They fell freely, silently, down her cheeks. It wasn't just the words Ella had spoken, it was the love, the fierce protectiveness, the unwavering loyalty of a daughter who knew the value of a mother's sacrifice. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but for Marie, those moments seemed endless. Every eye was on Ella and her, and in that instant, Marie could distinctly feel the judgment from those around them. However, what she felt more clearly than anything else was the unwavering determination in her daughter's eyes. Ella stepped down from the podium, her eyes no longer filled with hesitation or fear. What she had just done was not just an act of defending her mother, it was a declaration of war against anyone who disrespected her family. Marie didn't know what to do. Emotions surged within her, a mix of pride and sorrow. Her daughter had stood in front of the crowd, speaking truths that Marie had never dared to voice. Ella's words were not just facts but a declaration of human worth, a testament to the sacrifices of mothers like Marie. Marie stood up and walked toward Ella, pulling her into her arms. In that moment, no words were needed. They just stood there, silently, feeling the warmth of each other amidst these unexpected and unforgettable moments. "I'm sorry, baby," Marie whispered. Ella gently shook her head, wrapping her arms around Marie. "Mom, you don't have to apologize. This is what I had to do. I won't let anyone hurt you, and I'll never let that happen." A tear rolled down Marie's cheek. It was a tear of happiness. She thought about all the late nights Ella stayed up studying, the hours Marie spent sitting beside her with old textbooks, teaching her lessons that couldn't be found in school. They had nothing but love and effort, but in that moment, it was all they needed. When Ella looked up at Marie, she saw a different light in her daughter's eyes. Ella was no longer the bride standing next to her groom, but a strong woman, willing to stand up for her values, her family. "You make me so proud, Ella," Marie said, her voice choking with emotion. Ella smiled. You're the best mom. And I'll always be here for you. No one will ever make you feel small. Marie held her tighter, not wanting to let go. But life must go on, and even though those around them might not fully understand, for Marie, that moment was everything. When Marie and Ella returned to their table, the atmosphere in the hall had changed. The whispers, the scrutinizing glances were no longer hidden behind forced smiles. Everything felt unnervingly quiet, as if the entire world was watching them, waiting for a response. The groom stood next to the bride, his face surprised but unable to hide his emotions. He didn't say anything, just looked at Ella for a moment, then turned to Marie. She noticed something different in his eyes, not embarrassment or shame, but respect, though it wasn't openly expressed. Marie sat down, still unsure of what to say, but then Adam came over to them. He bowed his head politely, as if accepting a truth that couldn't be denied. Ella's mother, I apologize for what happened earlier. We never meant to offend you, he said, his voice sincere. Marie was a little surprised. This was not something she had expected from the groom's side, especially after the disdainful comments made throughout the ceremony. But it wasn't just Adam. His mother, Susan, also approached, her eyes slightly awkward. I also want to apologize, sister, Susan said, extending her hand toward Marie, looking a little flustered. We truly didn't understand the bond between the two of you. We were wrong. Everyone in the hall seemed stunned by this shift. As for Marie, part of her felt relieved, but another part couldn't hide the frustration. Not everything could be forgiven immediately. She had endured too many disapproving looks from them over the years, too many unfair judgments. Thank you, but I don't need anyone's forgiveness, Marie said, her voice calm. I just want to show everyone something. No one has the right to judge someone just because they don't have a degree or a title. A person's worth is not defined by that. Ella sat beside her mother, a look of pride in her eyes. Marie could feel the weight of the moment, knowing that Ella truly understood her. Every word she had spoken had been something her daughter needed to hear, something she needed to remember. True values, Marie knew, weren't found in superficial things like titles or degrees, but in how people lived and treated each other. Susan lowered her head, seemingly coming to some understanding, though she didn't speak another word. Adam, standing nearby, glanced at Marie again. His eyes were filled with a mix of admiration and guilt. Marie sensed that he might not fully grasp their story, but at least he had started to open his heart. The wedding continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. The tension that had previously hung in the air seemed to dissipate, and conversations began to feel lighter. The judgmental stares from the groom's family were no longer present, replaced by an almost hesitant respect. Marie didn't expect everything to change immediately, but she could tell that, for the first time, a part of them had begun to realize that a person's worth wasn't based on their outward appearance, but on what lay within in their heart and actions. They had faced together, they had built something stronger than any degree or title. It was a bond that spoke louder than any judgment from the outside world ever could. As the evening wore on, the music played, the conversations resumed, and the wedding carried on. But for Marie and Ella, this night would always remain a reminder of how far they had come, and the quiet, steadfast power of standing up for what mattered most, each other. The next day, everything seemed to have settled into a calm silence. The party had ended, and everyone returned to their daily lives. Yet, for Marie and Ella, what had happened the day before felt far from being a fleeting moment. It had touched old wounds, marking a significant milestone that couldn't be ignored. They returned home after the wedding. The house was quiet, free from the hustle and bustle of the party, and the scrutinizing glances of others. It was just the two of them, sitting in the living room, each lost in their own thoughts. Ella, having changed out of her wedding dress, sat down on the sofa beside her mother. The atmosphere in the room felt heavier than Marie had anticipated. Despite Ella's bold stand, Marie knew that life after the party wouldn't be simple. "Mom, I think I should talk to Adam again," Ella began, her voice serious, full of determination. Marie turned to her, a little puzzled. "What do you mean? Do you want to meet them again?" "No, I want to settle this once and for all," Ella replied, her eyes resolute. "I don't want them to think everything can be fixed just because of those apologies," she sighed. "I can't let them continue judging you like that. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be where I am today." Marie felt a surge of pride in her daughter's words, but she also felt a flicker of concern. Could things truly change? Could the Groom's family truly accept their different values? The questions lingered in her mind, unanswered. "You don't have to do that, Ella," Marie said softly, but something had shifted within her. "I have you by my side. That's all I need. But if you want to face them again, I'll support you." Ella nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. But there was something else on Marie's mind: the apology from Susan the night before. She had never expected such a thing, but now, it left her conflicted. Did Susan truly understand what Marie had endured? Could the Groom's family really change their perception? But as she looked into Ella's eyes, Marie knew the truth. It was the two of them, mother and daughter, who held the power to decide their future. They had weathered so many challenges together, so many times being judged and looked down upon. But with Ella by her side, Marie was certain she had done the right thing. And that, she realized, was what mattered most. The next day, Ella decided to call Adam. He didn't immediately object, but his hesitation was clear. His response didn't give her any comfort, and she could sense the unease in his words. Marie couldn't predict where this conversation would lead, but as she watched her daughter make the decision to face it, she realized that Ella had grown so much. She was no longer the naive girl who had started this journey. She was a strong, determined woman now, ready to fight for the love she believed in and for her own worth. Marie knew that they didn't need to worry about changing others' perceptions anymore. They had already changed. Their actions had already spoken louder than any judgment. And that, in itself, was enough. A week had passed since the wedding, but the unsettled feeling in Marie's heart hadn't gone away. On the outside, everything appeared calm, but deep down, she knew the change in how people saw them wouldn't happen overnight. Old wounds couldn't heal so quickly, and the Groom's family hadn't fully accepted their differences yet. This morning, while Marie was tidying up the house, she noticed Ella walking into the room, her face clouded with worry. She was holding her phone, her hand trembling slightly. "Mom, I can't believe it. Adam just sent me a message," Ella said, her voice tense, the weight of the moment clear in her words. Marie looked up, her heart sinking at the sight of her daughter's distress. There had been moments when Marie wondered if Ella was too stubborn about this relationship, but now, seeing her so anxious, Marie realized that things were far more complicated than they had first imagined. "What did he say?" Marie asked, her voice filled with concern and suspicion. Ella fell silent for a moment, her eyes downcast, before handing her phone to her mother. Marie took it, glancing at the screen, and her breath caught in her throat. Adam's words were blunt, almost painful to read. "We need to talk. There are things I couldn't say to you in front of others, but now I need to make things clear. I can't continue like this." Marie looked at Ella, noticing the fear in her eyes. Both of them knew that conversations like this were never easy. Despite Adam seeming more sincere in the past few days, there was still a lingering uncertainty in his message. What do you think he wants? Marie asked, her voice gentle but edged with worry. Ella sighed, her gaze distant. I don't know. But I have a feeling. Something's not right. Marie's protective instincts kicked in. Unable to sit back any longer, she decided that she and Ella needed to meet Adam in person. It was time to get clarity, not just for Ella but for herself too. Love was never easy, and maybe Adam hadn't fully understood the complexities of her family or the struggles they'd been through. But Marie was firm in her belief that at the very least, they deserved respect. When they arrived at Adam's house, the tension in the living room was palpable. Adam was seated on the couch, looking more serious than Marie had ever seen him. It was clear he had been preparing for this conversation, and the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Mom, Ella. Thank you for coming, Adam began, his voice sounding more strained than usual. I think we need to clear some things up. Marie studied him carefully, trying to remain calm, though her heart was racing. Adam, I don't understand why you sent such vague messages. If you have something to say, we should talk openly about it. Right. I have things I need to say, Adam replied, standing up. He glanced at Ella before turning his attention back to Marie. Honestly, I didn't know how to deal with all of this. I had a mistaken view of your family, of what you've been through and are still going through. Marie stayed silent, letting him speak. She wasn't going to interrupt, she needed to hear what he had to say. I was wrong to judge you based on appearances. And I was wrong not to see the strength, the resilience in you and Ella. You're not the person I thought you were. Ella looked at Adam, a touch of sympathy in her eyes, but her voice was steady when she spoke. So, does this mean you think everything between us will be fine now? Adam paused, his eyes searching for the right words, before he spoke again, this time with a hesitation that suggested he wasn't sure of his own answer. I'm not sure. But I want time to figure things out. I don't want to just be a part of your family anymore. I want to build a sincere relationship, even if it takes time. Ella's expression remained calm, but there was a firmness in her voice that Marie could feel deep within her. So, what does that mean? She asked, her tone measured but clear. Adam took a deep breath and looked at both of them. I think we can try to start over. But not just because I love Ella, but because I respect what you've done. I respect the strength you've shown, the way you've fought for each other. The conversation didn't unfold in the way Marie had expected. Adam didn't offer a definitive answer or a firm promise about the future, but at least he had opened up, admitted his mistakes, and reassessed his views. For Marie, that was an important first step not just for Adam but for them all. This was a chance to build a new foundation, not based on old prejudices but on mutual respect and understanding. As the conversation came to a close, Marie couldn't help but feel that, while they weren't out of the woods yet, this was a turning point. Adam had acknowledged his flaws, and now, there was room for growth that wasn't built on superficial judgments or assumptions but on a deeper respect for each other. And for Marie, that was enough for now. When they left Adam's house, none of them said a word, but Marie clearly sensed that no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, Ella and she would face it together. Love, forgiveness, and resilience would always be their strong foundation, whether the Groom's family accepted them or not. 2 weeks had passed since the conversation between them and Adam. Everything seemed to have returned to normal, but in Marie's heart, she couldn't stop thinking about the changes in Ella and her life, as well as the underlying tensions in their relationship with the Groom's family. Marie knew that their lives had entered a new phase, one where love and resilience would be the deciding factors. But she also couldn't deny that the wounds had not healed, and the unresolved conflicts between her family and the Groom's family were a heavy burden that couldn't easily be shaken off. Marie wondered if time would be enough to change old perceptions, to create a new relationship, one built on mutual respect and understanding rather than societal pressures or prejudices. She realized that, no matter what, she and Ella would not be defeated by external barriers. They would move forward together, facing the challenges ahead with the resilience and courage they had built over time.